Hello, guys. I'm Vladimir Zakharov, and I just had a book released, In Access Zone, How to Turn No into Yes. Today's broadcast is dedicated to this book. You can order my book at vladimirbook.com. This is a good old link, and it's easy to remember. Just type it into your browser. So, why does it have such a strange name? Sometimes we knock on some doors of our destiny, but they're closed. We want to get something, but all we get is the answer no. And that is what we're going to talk about in the book, How to Turn No into Yes. Once I was watching a movie, and there was such a dialogue. One person said that he had received a negative answer to his proposal, and a person he talked to said to him, just go back and ask him what he really wants in order to turn the answer into yes. In other words, what you have to do in order to get a positive answer. This is such a universal way to negotiate with the universe. There are, let's say, telephone numbers that we dial to, and lines are not busy. Or let's say you have needed phone numbers, but most of the time you hear, wait for an answer, wait for an answer. Your call is important for us. At the moment, all operators are busy. Wait for an answer. Then the line went dead. You send your wish again. You want to achieve something in your life. A different status, other income, new relationship. You want your dream to come true, but instead of it, from the depths of space you hear, wait for an answer. Or just beeps, isn't it? You hear just beeps and that's it. Only beeps in response. Well, there's a special technique. This technique came to us from China. Some researchers say the Chinese received it from ancient civilizations. Maybe these were the civilizations of gods who built the pyramids in Machu Picchu, dug the Grand Canyon in Arizona. Previous civilizations, which knew that time was not only quantitative characteristics, i.e., 1 p.m. or 1 a.m., but it also has qualitative characteristics, and every moment of time is heterogeneous. Using a particular time to coordinate, we can call the phone number we need. Maybe for most of you, it's some kind of abstraction, but when you finished reading 90 pages of my book, the link to it you'll find by typing into your browser vladimirbook.com, the things that I'm saying would make more sense to you. Tell me, who's familiar with The Art of War by Sun Tzu? There was a man who wrote this book, The Art of War. It has been studied for centuries in military academies, and it is very popular among Eastern businessmen and among Western businessmen the last couple of decades. In his book, Sun Tzu tells about the philosophy of war, how to win it. Do you agree? It is a very famous book. Lots of people know about Sun Tzu, but most of you know only half of the story about Sun Tzu. Just philosophy described in his book. Only a few people know, or almost nobody knows, that he was a practitioner of art called mystical gates of destiny. In Chinese, it's called QiMen Dunjia, or mystical gates that hide Jia. It is about the heterogeneity of time, its layers, and what I call the password for universal Wi-Fi. As if there are gates of time that open, close, open, close, open, close, open, close, in front of us. Let us suppose there are many floors, and on each floor there's a door that can be opened with some algorithm, unknown to the majority of people. We can wait for weeks or months until that door opens. Then we leave to pee, and at that moment the door opened and closed. And now we keep waiting for weeks and months while life is passing us by. That is QiMen Dunjia, the knowledge that Sun Tzu possessed. Contains this algorithm, how to find out which door is opened. There is such an interesting collision. People that are familiar with this war philosophy or business philosophy, they're familiar with the esoteric part, with the strategic part described in the Sun Tzu book. However, they know nothing about the metaphysical or mystical component called the mystical gates. And people that are familiar with the internal components of Chinese metaphysics are not familiar with the philosophy of business. That is why we have two groups of people who have partial knowledge, but Sun Tzu himself possessed the whole knowledge. In addition to my book, which you can find at vladimirbook.com, I recommend you to buy the Book of Sun Tzu and read at least one chapter, not necessarily the whole book. It is pretty thick. 1 page or 2-3 pages of your choice, so you could realize what I'm talking about. Tell me, who saw a movie called The Battle of the Red Cliff? You can search for it in the browser. It's a movie of high artistic quality, but I strongly recommend to watch it from its historical point of view and educational one. From the very beginning, we meet a character named Zhuge Liang. He is a military advisor, and the plot of the movie is basically built around this military advisor. At a certain moment, at the moment of a decisive battle, he performs a ritual, a very beautiful ritual with a feather and so on. In the next broadcast, I'll tell you more about this battle and what Zhuge Liang did. He changed the direction of the wind to exactly the opposite. As a result, the enemy's arrows didn't reach the side of Zhuge Liang, and, on the contrary, they hit the enemy's ships. These were flaming arrows. The crew on the ships were not professional sailors, just a mercenary infantry, ground forces, so to speak. They didn't get sea legs yet, but they were very confident on their victory. They knew the direction of the wind, so they connected the ships together to slow down the shaking. Because the wind changed its direction, this relatively small amount of arrows hit the enemy's ships. Some of them hit the target, and the entire fleet burned down. Zhuge Liang got a phenomenal, one of the most outstanding victories in history when the enemy was stronger in 10 or 100 times. Everything that captured about this ritual is the external part. But Zhuge Liang is one of the most famous masters of this art, QiMen, or mystical gates. That is what I mean in my book at vladimirbook.com when I talk about how to get access to the universal Wi-Fi. Once I saw a huge monument of Zhuge Liang in China. He is a very famous and well-respected man. He has a huge monument in modern China. He's some kind of Lenin in ancient China. The monument in honor of a crazy metaphysician. People who share a skeptical approach, they don't get it at all, what it is all about. I don't want to burden you with this story. One day we will talk about it. I will share with you other interesting, very well-known characters, thanks to which, for example, emperors became emperors. There always was such a kingmaker who stayed most of the time behind the stage. They have been asking Zhuge Liang to take part in that war for a long time, but his answer was no, and they went to his house. I visited the place where his house once was. There's a pagoda on that mountain now. There are, if I'm not mistaken, 500 steps to this pagoda. I was in there. That is all in China, and that's pretty interesting. The reason for applying it, if you want to get tools of the gods, as we may call it. Yesterday, I watched a couple of videos of a series about ancient civilizations because I'm more and more interested in this issue. We aren't really the most developed civilization that lived on Earth. There were tools that allowed them to build buildings that we still can't build. So, in my opinion, it was the civilization of gods that operated the knowledge of time heterogeneity that is included in Art of Mystic Gates or QiMen. We believe that Cartesian time is homogeneous, and every point of the timeline is identical to any other point of this timeline. What if it isn't? What if there's something we cannot see? Now we make a phone call or make a wish, and the answer is yes, and the next phone call will be possible in 2 or 3 months. That window, that door, that gate will stay open only for 2 hours. These 2 hours might be at daytime or at nighttime. How can we know it if we do not have a special calendar? It is the art of mystical gates that contains a calendar with the information when the gates open. These gates serve for different purposes, for relations, for health, for career, for property sale, for business, for investments. i.e., different components fit for different tasks. But first, we need that calendar. Or we can send a request to the universal server, but we do not have a password. This art has passwords, and you can get a few of them right now by ordering my book at vladimirbook.com. This book costs some symbolic money. For example, the price of my 2-day personal training starts from $2,000. The book costs only $14. It contains my own experience of 20 years practice and experience of thousands of years of usage of these strategies by the civilization that is already discovered by historians, and who knows for how long it was used by civilizations that historians have yet to discover. I use this technique for my clients, for my students, for my business. We use these gates when they are open, this heterogeneity of time, when we choose the time for certain starts. We use it to determine when it is better to start the course. We use it with our clients during negotiations. QiMen has several layers. These are 8 gates, or doors, 9 stars, 10 heavenly stems, and 10 so-called gods, and they are all located in 8 palaces. This is a rather comprehensive technique. Imagine that we have a certain palace. This palace contains several floors. 8 characters live on the first floor. They are called gates. On the floor above live 10 characters called heavenly stems. There are 9 characters that live on the one floor above, and they are called QiMen Dunjia. And finally, on the top floor, or better to say, above the palace, there are birds. There are 10 birds, but only 8 of them present at the same time. These birds are called gods or spirits. Sometimes we call them archetypes. 2 of these 8 flies to a warmer place for 6 months. After this, another pair of 2 flies to a warmer place for 6 months. They have a watch. They have so-called rotation. 2 birds for half a year, another 2 birds for the next half of a year, instead of the previous ones, but 6 remain unchanged. So guys, there are lots of videos on YouTube, a lot of works, researchers over the past 10 years who show us that everything we thought about history, about the history of mankind, about the history of technology, might not be correct. And I think over the next 10 to 20 years, humanity will change their knowledge, especially what goes to the internal knowledge, something that we thought was simple. You know, let's go back. Let's talk about those gods. We were taught at school that there are ancient myths. There are myths of India. There are myths of Greece and Egypt. People prayed to certain gods. What if it is not a myth? What if it is true? What if it is history? They simply called the gods whatever they would call them. What if they were like savages who saw planes landing on their islands during World War II? I talk about the Aborigines of the Pacific Ocean. When the Americans began to use their island as bases in order to block the communication ways of the Japanese, planes suddenly landed on these islands. People came out of the planes. Those people had absolutely amazing weapons and sacks full of food and other beautiful things that were falling from the sky, time after time. Among them were beads that were given to the Aborigines prostitutes from the soldiers. Other gifts were given for the work that Aborigines did on the military base. What if a similar story was carved in the cave art or painted on murals of the temples? Maybe yes, maybe no. Usually Feng Shui, or art of mystical gates, is presented as Chinese nonsense. A peasant was sitting near the river and saw a tortoise with Lo Shu square sign crawling out onto the riverbank. What if that was not quite true, and it was nothing more than a simplified way to describe a situation of observing a completely different civilization, which many of them were not able to understand? And this civilization had knowledge about the heterogeneity of time and portals that have existed to the corners of the universe we still haven't had access to. And the art of mystical gates has these keys, in my opinion. The first attempt to make them available is to find them in my book at vladimirbook.com. Thanks. Use the heterogeneity of time, and good luck.